be heard? Just please confirm so that I can start with the class. Can I be heard? Okay. So I left you in the last class on international relations with Quad. And Quad was the Quadrilateral Strategic Alliance. The Quadrilateral Strategic Alliance was meeting for the first time in history in the United States of America. And just one day before, that Quad could have a formal meeting in a virtual announcement. Three countries who are very much part of the Quad, that is the United States of America, Australia, and the United Kingdom, thought together and made an announcement for a strategic military alliance, which is now in short called the AUKUS. AUKUS is an acronym for Australia, the UK, and the US. So if you shorten it, it comes like AUKUS. That is the acronym for AUKUS. Now, why have I taken AUKUS after the Quad is the reason being Quad came back way in 2006, 2007. And then at that point of time, we were four and hence the Quad. But later on, we were joined by Australia, who left the Quad and came back with a bang in 2017, only to form an additional military alliance with the United States of America and the United Kingdom. They are all part of what is also called the economic order called the G7. And when we think of the number of alliances that the countries around the world are making, we have to look at it from the perspective of India alone. But at the same time, we have to also understand the global impact of it. So just like I mentioned, that on the day that the ship of Quad was supposed to sail in the waters, the winds of the sail were taken out by AUKUS. Now, what is it that AUKUS is different and necessary when Quad was already existing? First and foremost, when I spoke about Quad, I emphasized it's an informal organization. I also said that it is the coming together of the four biggest democracies of the world when we talk about the Quad. And of course, by Australia joining us, it became the fifth biggest democracy in the Asia Pacific, or now what, because of the India presence, is called the Indo-Pacific. So it was an informal organization. It was a non-military alliance based entirely on democratic principles. These reasons are being emphasized because AUKUS has come in the paper this year, not likely to come for you in 2022, will make an appearance in 2023 when you are going to compare SCO, AUKUS, and Quad together maybe, or you might even bring in BRICS together and make a comparison. AUKUS has set history that after 1958, and the formation of NATO after the Second World War, it is considered to be the most strategic military agreement or alliance. So first and foremost, AUKUS is the coming together of three Quad countries. That's the first point. The second point is it is located in and around the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific region. It is also a strategic military alliance. It has brought us back from where we had started about the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And so it has repercussions for what is called the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is a trilateral. It's a trilateral security pact in the Indo-Pacific. Under it, Australia acquires nuclear submarine aided and supported by the UK and the USA. Now, why does it become so important? Because as a result of all these 6 points should be with you. And the 7th point, as a result of AUKUS, Australia becomes the 7th country in the world to be empowered with a nuclear submarine. So which are the exclusive countries for nuclear submarine armament? If you look at it, it is the 5 member countries of the Security Council, which means the United States, Russia, China, United Kingdom, France, and along with it are we, the developing nation, India, and now Australia. So there are 7 countries in all, out of which the first 6 have done it so far. And now Australia is being made to be nuclear armed by United Kingdom and USA. It makes it so important because after 1958, when the USA transferred technology to UK, Australia now only becomes the 2nd country in the world for this transfer of technology. Here we need to question is that although India was a part of the Quad, India and Japan have been excluded in this transfer of technology. India has always been asking the US for the Hulk design. It's called the Hulk design. This I'm giving you as points which you're going to mention later when we are going to compare what is the future of Quad along with AUKUS. So there I'm going to mention specifically what is it that is going to be the future of these 2 organizations together, complementary, or is Quad going to lose its relevance altogether? At that point of time, I will talk about it. But here it needs to be mentioned that when India had asked the USA for what it is called as the US Navy hull of classification design, hull of classification design for its nuclear submarine, the USA had refused to share this knowledge. So it needs to be emphasized that the Navy hull of classification, what I've written, the US Navy hull of classification for nuclear submarines was denied to India when India had requested the US for the same. However, it has been provided to Australia. So along with the military, this will now become the 9th point. Along with military support, the other areas of partnership include, what did they include? A1, that is artificial intelligence. It also includes what is called cyber capabilities. It also includes quantum technology. Let me tell you, this is the future for which everyone is now working on, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Facebook. Everybody is working in the area of artificial intelligence and quantum technology. So what you're going to be dealing with in the next few years is going to be a virtual reality. And this is how these countries together are now working on what is called artificial intelligence, cyber capabilities, and quantum technology. This along with additional additional undersea additional undersea capabilities. This along with additional undersea capabilities. So what I've spoken to you till this date is that just one day before the Quad actual summit, the virtual summit took place on the 15th of September 2021 in the United States of America, where it was announced that a strategic trilateral military agreement was to come into force between the three countries who are also members of the Quad in the Indo-Pacific region. And they have said that this is being done to maintain the peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. China has specifically not been mentioned. You please remember this, that China has nowhere been mentioned in the formation of AUKUS, but it is quite clear that this organization is a face up for whatever strategic alliances and the infrastructure development that China is carrying out in the South China Sea, affecting the entire Indo-Pacific region, is what has resulted in a first of its kind since 1958 in the formation of the AUKUS. Now, the purpose is, of course, termed as collective security. What is it termed as? Purpose is of collective security. Purpose is of collective security of the Indo-Pacific region. Right. Now, what has been the immediate effect of AUKUS? Since 2016, if you've written this, or you can take it from again from the video, it really doesn't matter. We'll say the immediate effect. Okay? The immediate effect. So, in the immediate effect, since 2016, Australia was in a partnership or a military deal with France for the supply of submarines. It had tied up with what is called as the naval group. Naval group. Its naval group is a group of companies which was dealing with the manufacture of submarines. It is also known as the DCNS. It was renamed as the DCNS. Like, for example, a lot of companies changed their name. So this naval group had also changed its name. Australia had submarines which were called the Collins. Since 2009, it was in possession of submarines which were called the Collins. It tied up with France, with the naval group France, in 2016 to supply them with 12 submarines. With 12 submarines, okay? To replace Collins with what is called the attack class of submarines. With what is called the attack class of submarines. If you want to know where have I picked up all this data, please go to the net and look at, there's a write-up on AUKUS by the Times of India, by the Economic Times, and then there are some international political analysts who have written about AUKUS. I will share the link with you if you like. A lot of data is also available in Wikipedia. The only problem is that it's voluminous. So if you pay attention, you will not need to do AUKUS from anywhere else. That is a guarantee. In fact, whichever class is being taken up under international relations, all you need to do is to put them point-wise, be ready to write them in your main exam whenever it comes. If it comes as a short answer question for your prelims, you are already blessed. So, coming back to the Collins class of submarine to be replaced by the attack class of submarine, Australia was in a $90 billion deal. A a $90 billion deal with France. As late as the 30th of August 2021, the Naval Group and Australian Foreign Secretary came out with a joint statement saying that the 12 submarine supply program was very much on the anvil. It cannot be denied that after 2016, the submarine program was not able to take off and a lot of money was going down the drain. However, if Australia was still committed to France till the 30th of August 2021, we do not know what happened or conspired in a matter of 15 days that AUKUS came into existence. It is said that the roots of AUKUS were actually discussed at the Cornwall Conference. At the Cornwall Conference, the G7 summit at Cornwall in the UK in June laid the seeds for AUKUS. That is from where AUKUS originated. And so within a matter of 15 days after the announcement, this deal was cancelled. After the cancellation of this deal, it has cost Australia $2.4 billion. $2.4 billion. All right. And what has happened to France? France has lost. And it's important to know this because later on, Boris Johnson says that we have created jobs. So I need to mention this here, that it has what is called, France has lost. Okay. France has lost as many as 12 billion Australian dollars. France has lost $12 billion from the deal because that is the amount which was coming to it. Along with it, 4,000 people have been rendered unemployed over a period of 6 years, involving 200 contractors. So this has been the repercussion for France. France lost a $90 billion deal, immediate payment of $12 billion, 4,000 in terms of jobs over a 6-year period, and 200 contractors. That is the effect for France. On its part, Australia has lost $2.4 billion in whatever payment it has made to the naval group over a period of time. And of course, it has lost its friendship with France, at least with immediate effect. So there is a loss of credibility. There is a loss of credibility for Australia. Where is there a loss of credibility for Australia? In the European Union. In the European Union. So what does it affect? It affects the European Union's tie-up with Australia in terms of trade, and it also affects EU's tie-up with the USA, or what is called the transatlantic, please write this, the transatlantic treaty for free trade. For free trade. All of it has got delayed because France has taken a stand not to participate either with the USA and Australia. After the formation of AUKUS, France responded by withdrawing both its foreign ambassadors from the USA and Australia. The USA ambassador has gone back, but the Australian ambassador has not gone back as of now. So it means that France is really miffed. Now, as part of NATO, all these countries are together, and NATO as a military and strategic alliance has history, and nobody and no other organization can beat that. And please keep that in mind whenever you are writing about any organization vis-a-vis NATO. Like, for example, you're going to talk about the Shanghai Corporation. Now, Shanghai corporation cannot replace NATO. So the amount of solidarity that the post-World War II has shown to these countries or shown to the world how these countries come together needs to be realized. Not only that, in times to come, we are going back to the World War II groupings once again, with India and Japan being left out. And Japan has nothing to do with nuclear armament after having suffered both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing. Japan is apprehensive about the AUKUS deal, although there was no reaction both from India and Japan, since the heads of the countries were very much physically present in the US a day before the announcement had come, as they were supposed to participate in the physical interaction of the Quad. Now, here and now only, I will tell you AUKUS versus Quad. I will go into the details and come back to AUKUS again. Don't mind my shifting in both the points, because it's important for you to realize that does AUKUS in any way challenge the Quad setup? First and foremost, that is an informal organization of budding democracies who have come together not for the purpose of military alignment, but for for the purpose of cooperation, for strengthening ties in the Indo-Pacific region. We are talking about Quad right now. So they have come together for the purpose of greater cooperation amongst the democracies, the biggest democracies of the world. They are also tying up and strengthening in areas of space for cyber security reasons, cooperation in the region of climate change, and also in the regions of what is called as disaster management. They are also looking for transfer of technology between the five countries, because it was said that strengthening of technology between the countries is very important for security purposes in the Indo-Pacific region. And although not mentioned anywhere, this kind of an alignment, although informal, suggests that the countries together are now facing a very aggressive and volatile China together. Reason being, China has had repeated fallouts with all the countries of the world under its Belt and Road Initiative, or what is called the OBOR. What is called the OBOR? OBOR, the Belt and Road Initiative. China is making aggressive inroads in the territories of most of the countries in and around the Asia Pacific. It is in direct confrontation with Japan in the South China Sea, as I had told you earlier, along with Philippines. It is facing flack from Taiwan because it wants to take over Taiwan, and also South Korea. All these areas are in and around in the Indo-Pacific region. For Australia per se, China has done is what is called sanctioned against trade relations with Australia. So China was Australia's biggest trading partner, but now it has put sanctions against it, resulting in a lot of loss of exchequer for Australia. Not only that, China has been very aggressive in Australia's response to COVID. And Australia has also not taken that well. In fact, a few years ago, when we were talking about Quad, in 2007, Australia walked out of Quad only because of its relations with China, with an adverse trade agreement, with sanctions and embargoes against Australia by China. This was one very important step which Australia needed to do in order to feel secure. So what is happening in the Indo-Pacific region is that there is an element of insecurity, amongst countries due to the aggressive stand of China. When I was talking about Quad, I told you how Japan was losing and having a war with China over the islands which were there in the South China Sea. And similarly, for Japan, and after Japan, Australia was facing the flag. United States is again under a lot of pressure from China post-COVID situation. One, because the WHO headquarters has the biggest contribution from the US economy, but because of the head of the WHO siding with China, the real cause of the pandemic has never come to be known. Australia and China and the US are all under deficit trade agreements with each other. So China is the aggressive trading partner with US also and with Australia also. In fact, China's trading agreements with almost all countries of the world are in a plus for it and a minus for the other countries. We can go into the details of it, but for now, it will suffice to say that it is the insecurity vis-a-vis the Chinese government that resulted in the formation of AUKUS, and Quad too had come out with the same reason. However, Quad has a bigger platform. It is engaging in disaster management. It is engaging in climate change. It is engaging in telecommunications, in infrastructure development, in what is called making a common COVID platform to fight pandemics in the future. And therefore, it can be said that the AUKUS is actually supplementing the Quad. The AUKUS is actually supplementing the Quad. It supplements the Quad because it's a military alliance. All that Quad could do was to engage in military exercises. And at that point of time, when India too was a part of the military exercises which took place in the Indo-Pacific region, along with the USA and Japan, which Australia joined way back in 2020, it needs to be emphasized that India had given its coastline for a base of these military exercises. So it was a base for these military exercises. In times to come, it needs to be seen whether India will provide the same pace to AUKUS or not for the launch of missiles or for any other purpose or for stationing their armaments. The probability is almost nil, but we must look at it from the point of view of an aggressive China in the Galwan Valley, for an aggressive China in East Ladakh, and for an aggressive China in Arunachal Pradesh. Vis-a-vis that, India is positioned comfortably in the Quad, which is nothing but a part of now what is now formed as the AUKUS. So a military strategic alliance bolsters up or boosts up the confidence of the other countries in the Quad, and there are many more people who are wanting to join the Quad, but as of now, they have been left high and dry. It should be remembered that in international relations, there are only two things which matter. And in fact, if you look at it, for the developing world, which includes us also, what matters most is economic alliance. So whether it is the SCO, whether it is AUKUS, whether it is BRICS, India's paramount and only positioning is regarding economic ties. And it wants to improve its economic relations, its trade agreements, transfer of technologies with all these countries. If you're going to write these points are going to be common for all your organizations. I'm actually teaching you how to write an answer. And this is what you're going to put there. You will always going to talk about the organization vis-a-vis India's positioning in the organization. And what are the pluses that we have? India is a budding democracy. India is one of the largest democracies of the world. And not only that, it is nuclear empowered enough to have a submarine while not being a part of the Big Five. And the Big Five is the Security Council. And although India has been trying very hard to enter into that framework, China has been stopping it from doing so. And it needs to be seen that at what point of time, like USA has empowered Australia with a nuclear submarine, USA will take a stand to include India in the Security Council. One of them has to take a stand on that. Now, what was the reaction from the others in this of the global community to AUKUS. So China, of course, said that it is going back to your Cold War mentality and that it is leading to an arms race and nuclear proliferation in the Pacific region. So China says that it is going back to the Cold War era, going to an arms race, resulting in an arms race in the Asia Pacific region, and we are going back to what is called the nuclear proliferation era. That is the stand of China. Canada, now, why Canada and New Zealand are going to be mentioned here is because these five countries, if you look at the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Australia, France, and New Zealand, this is important. So the UK, the US, the Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are part of what is called the biggest intelligence network after the Second World War, which is called as the Five Eyes Alliance. I repeat, it is called the Five Eyes Alliance. This Five Eyes Alliance is nothing but a... How is it that I have left out? Okay, Australia's there. So this Five Eyes Alliance is nothing but an intelligence agency network. It's an intelligence agency network that has been working post World War II and very active during the Cold War, that is from 1946 to 1981. Now, if you look at this, what is called the Five Eyes Alliance, it is said to be the most effective intelligence agencies of the world. It is classified as the most effective intelligence agency of the world during the Cold War period after World War II. Now, if you look at these five countries, they are what is called the Anglosphere. Okay, so like the atmosphere and the hydrosphere, this is what is called the Anglosphere, the coming together of the Anglo population of the world. So AUKUS is said to be a part of the Anglosphere. There is BRICS and Shanghai are more Asian organizations, and that is why they have a different kind of relevance. Now, Quad 2 has an Asian presence in terms of Japan and in terms of India. So if you look at it from this perspective, rightfully so, the Five Eyes Allegiance or the Five Eyes Alliance has come together. These three have come together. Left is New Zealand and Canada, and New Zealand is just next to Australia. It is said that the Australian Prime Minister had spoken only to Jacinda, that is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, before signing the AUKUS deal, asking her if she would like to come on board of the AUKUS, to which the Prime Minister of New Zealand refused categorically and has stated clearly that the nuclear submarines would not be allowed to enter into the territorial waters of New Zealand. So the first stand which New Zealand and Canada, though part of the Five Eyes Alliance for intelligence sharing post-Cold War and after the Second World War, have taken a stand of maintaining their nuclear disarmament stand. So they are going to be, New Zealand and Canada refuse to be part of the AUKUS. They have maintained their nuclear disarmament stand. All right? This was important. Now, what about Philippines? I'll tell you those who have applauded this. Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan have all welcomed the AUKUS deal, suggesting that this is the best way to counter the effect of China. Now, the negatives in and around the Pacific. So, the negatives in and around the Pacific are Indonesia, Malaysia, the reaction of ASEAN, the reaction of Russia. Russia is concerned. The Chinese reaction, I've already told the 3 points. Indonesia, Malaysia, ASEAN, Russia, and have shown concern regarding AUKUS. In fact, the Malaysian counterpart has said that it will have talks with China before trying to understand the future course of action. So I think that that was important to be mentioned. I also said that it has affected the transatlantic trade agreement, between EU and the European Union and the USA. So the European Union has taken a stand that it is a stab in their partner's back, which is France, and therefore there's an element of mistrust with the USA. But at the same time, the small East European countries like Lithuania and Serbia are all for this trade agreement, having very little money left in terms of foreign exchange. So this agreement has come through. Also, Australia's agreement with EU, although stalled for the time being, but it will also see the dawn of light. Like I said, economics determines international relations. So this is what I had to tell you about what were the effects of the formation of AUKUS in and around this. And now I need to bring you back to the question as to why Australia approached the United Kingdom and the USA for this kind of a nuclear deal. The first and foremost point important here is in the France deal with Australia, what was being supplied were submarines which were going to run on nuclear reactors, which were enriched with only 7% of uranium. So what are they called? They are called low enriched uranium submarines. You need to know this because when you read it in the first go, it doesn't make sense to you. So now I'm coming to the most important part for the formation of AUKUS, which is the nuclear, whether it is nuclear proliferation or whether it is nuclear non-proliferation is going to be decided by you, not today, but the year after this. This is going to be an important topic for the GS main, because then the whole plethora of, there are about 8 submarines which are going to be supplied within a matter of 18 months. And therefore, I say that the 2023 GS mains will have something of this. AUKUS has already come as a small question in this year's paper 2. And when I read with IR, it is paper 2. So there, AUKUS has already come. SCO has also come. What has not come is how you're going to link all of these organizations. And that is the next step which is going to come. So why is it important that we know about this nuclear proliferation or non-proliferation is because in 18 months' time, Australia is going to become one of the 7 countries of the world which is going to have a nuclear submarine. Now, when it went to France, it was looking for submarines which are called the attack class, but they were being powered by nuclear reactors which were running on low enriched uranium. When this happens, the reactors need to be refueled or refilled every 10 years. And that requires an additional cost. And Australia should be known that out of those 7 countries, Australia is the only civil country, which does not possess nuclear reactors. आपको ये समझने की जरूरत है कि जो हमारी इंटरनेशनल एटॉमिक एनर्जी कमीशन है, यूनाइटेड नेशंस का जो एक पार्ट है, वो इंस्पेक्शन करता है जहां पर भी 20% मोर से ज्यादा की यूरेनियम एनरिच्ड न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर्स प्रेजेंट है। क्यों करता है ऐसे? क्योंकि 20% से ज्यादा पर ही आप न्यूक्लियर वेपन बना सकते हैं। अब ऑस्ट्रेलिया क्यों एक्सेप्शन है इस पूरे रेस का? हमारे यहाँ न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर्स है, हम न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी यूज करते हैं बिजली की सप्लाई में, ए फॉर मेडिसिनल पर्पसेस ऑल्सो, फॉर आवर सबमरीन्स ऑल्सो, बट ऑस्ट्रेलिया इज अ कंट्री which has no nuclear reactors, which means that it is deficient in uranium. When it becomes deficient in uranium, it becomes dependent on the other countries for supply. With France, it had to refuel those submarines every 10 years, a risk which it did not want to take. As the case with the United Kingdoms and the United States of America, which give you 93% enriched, high enriched uranium. It is the HEU, the high enriched uranium, which is going to be supplied in the nuclear submarines, which are going to come from the United States of America. Now, here the design has been provided by the USA, and the construction or the making of it will be done by the United Kingdom. And these nuclear reactors are then going to be built in Australia. It should be mentioned here that what are the kind of propulsion system that is being made available by the USA and the UK. So the US naval reactors are all, the US naval reactors are all what is called the PWR. Now these are technological terms, आप इसको ऐसे ही रट लीजिए क्योंकि उसमें कुछ समझने के लिए नहीं है। प्रेशराइज्ड वाटर रिएक्टर्स क्या होंगे? जो हाई प्रेशर में और नीचे जाके सबमरीन रह सकती है, तो डिटेक्शन बहुत उसका लो होगा। The more efficient it is in avoiding being detected on the radar, the more effective the submarine is, and that is the whole idea of a submarine. So these power pressurized or the PWR powered water resistant submarines of the USA can stay for hours underwater without being detected, and they require no refueling. So PWR is your pressurized water reactors. These are your pressurized water reactors, all right? And the propulsion system is being made by the UK, and the propulsion system is called what is known as the Rolls-Royce PWR-3. It calls the Rolls-Royce PWR-3. Okay? So the Royal Navy's new Dreadnought class is what is being aimed for the Australian nuclear submarine. It is called the Navy's new Dreadnought. And that's how the spelling is, Dreadnought. Dreadnought class, which is called the US design, but the reactor technology is from the United Kingdom, which is known as the Rolls-Royce PWR-3. Now, what had to be refueled in 10 years in the case of France requires no refueling so far as the submarines which are going to be jointly supplied by the United States of America and the United Kingdom. During the entire lifetime of the submarine, it requires no refueling. It can remain underwater for a very long period of time and has easier capability of being not detected. Now, when we come to the nuclear non-proliferation part, I wanted to tell you is that some amount of nuclear reactors are allowed for peaceful purposes, and they are inspected by the IAEA. However, in the case of Australia, the part which is known as the black hole of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which allows these nuclear reactors for peaceful purposes, is being used in the case of Australia to arm it with a nuclear submarine. I repeat, it is an act of nuclear proliferation because it takes advantage of the loophole in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which allows nuclear reactors to be set up for peaceful purposes. आपको इसको एक बार मैं और रिपीट करती हूँ. देश जो कि न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी की सप्लाई यूज करते हैं, उनके पास न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर होता है. उस रिएक्टर में वो यूरेनियम की सप्लाई एज अ फ्यूल यूज करते हैं टू मेक द न्यूक्लियर और प्रोड्यूस द न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी. ये सारी एनर्जी न्यूक्लियर पावर सप्लाई में इस्तेमाल होती है, मेडिसिन में सप्लाई इस्तेमाल होती है, मेडिकल रीजंस के लिए भी सप्लाई होती है. पर हमें न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर की जरूरत होती है जब हम सबमरीन का काम करते हैं या मिसाइल्स, न्यूक्लियर मिसाइल्स बनाते हैं, उसमें भी हम इसको यूज करते हैं. अब ये टेक्नोलॉजी देश के, वर्ल्ड के, देश के नहीं, इस दुनिया के 6 देशों के पास है, जिसमें से एक भारत भी है. अब क्या हो रहा है कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया एक ऐसा देश है जिसके पास की न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी का एबीसी नहीं है, उसके पास कोई न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर नहीं है. बट क्योंकि आईएई कहता है कि आप पीसफुल पर्पस के लिए न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर लगा सकते हैं, उसके तहत यूके और यूएसए न्यूक्लियर सबमरीन ऑस्ट्रेलिया को सप्लाई कर रहे हैं. यहां कोई न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर बनेगा नहीं, पर जो भी यूरेनियम इसमें से फ्री होगा, जब भी फ्री होगा, उसको ऑस्ट्रेलिया वेपन में तो इस्तेमाल नहीं करेगा, वो तो सबमरीन में ही इस्तेमाल करेगा. पर ऐसा आगे के देश कर सकते हैं. The world at large can use this loophole of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to arm itself with nuclear weapons. अब क्वाड में तो नहीं, बट ब्रिक्स का एक पार्टनर जिसको हम ब्राजील के नाम से जानते हैं, ब्राजील भी न्यूक्लियर टेक्नोलॉजी यूज कर रहा है पावर जनरेशन के लिए. उसके पास भी न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर है, बट जो उसका यूरेनियम का एनरिचमेंट है वो सिर्फ 7% है. और मैंने आपको क्या बताया कि न्यूक्लियर वेपन 20% से ही ज्यादा पे बन सकता है. पर जो ऑस्ट्रेलिया को अब जो हाई एनरिच यूरेनियम प्रोवाइड किया जा रहा है, उसमें यूरेनियम 93% है. सो देयरफॉर द आर्म्स रेस एंड द न्यूक्लियर प्रोलिफरेशन are revisiting the world after the 1980s. That is the highlight of AUKUS, for which now the IEA has to be vigilant to observe that other countries do not follow suit and use this glitch in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to arm themselves with nuclear weapons. अगर किसी को ये बात समझ नहीं आई हो तो प्लीज अपने कमेंट में लिख दीजिएगा. मैं आपको वापस से न्यूक्लियर नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन ट्रीटी पढ़ाने की कोशिश करूंगी तो आपको ये बात समझ में आ जाएगी. बस इतनी सी बात आप समझिए, एक देश ऐसा है जिसके पास न्यूक्लियर का कुछ भी नहीं है और सडनली उसको 93% एनरिच यूरेनियम मिल रही है. तो अगर ऑस्ट्रेलिया इसको इस्तेमाल नहीं करेगा वेपन बनाने के लिए तो कोई बात नहीं, पर आने वाले समय में कई देश इसी चीज का फायदा उठाते हुए न्यूक्लियर वेपन बना सकते हैं. और वो कौन से कई देश होंगे उसके बारे में जानकारी आपको भी है और हमें भी है, उसके बारे में यहाँ जिक्र करने की जरूरत नहीं. आप अपने आंसर में वो बात नहीं लिखेंगे जब तक कि कोई इंटरनेशनल एनालिस्ट उस बात को नहीं कहेगा, इसलिए मैं उसको यहाँ इंक्लूड नहीं करूंगी. फ्रॉम द व्यू पॉइंट ऑफ ऑकस इट्स नॉट इम्पॉर्टेंट. I think that is about all that I need to tell you about AUKUS. I hope I have given you a fresh perspective on AUKUS from what you have read in the newspapers and in other places, because the sources have been 4 or 5 and I have tried to do my best in bringing it together. I take from you 2-3 minutes so that I can come together with BRICS. So just 2 minutes, the camera will remain on and so will be the mic. Just give me 2 minutes. So BRICS Summit. BRICS is an organization that came into being in and was thought of in 2006, where the foreign ministers of the first 4 countries, when it was called BRIC, B-R-I-C, met together in New York for the General Assembly Summit of the United Nations. And there it was decided for these countries to come together and form an organization for the purpose of better global economic trade and partnership. Now, BRIC is an acronym, it's a short form for nations like Brazil, R stands for Russia, India, China, and later on in 2010, it was joined by South Africa. The word BRICS has come from one paper which was written in 2001 by a guy who was the chairperson of what is called the Goldman Sachs. And he talked about the emerging economies of the world. And when he talked about the emerging economies of the world, he said that India, Brazil, China, and of course Russia were going to be the dominant economies in times to come. We are still waiting for that dominance to be shown. But needless to say that the 13th BRICS Summit was held on the 9th of September 2021. What I want to tell you is that 9th of September BRICS Summit, 15th of September AUKUS, again 16th of September Quad, how fast the international relations change and how fast the waters of the seas and the oceans across the globe keep changing as countries define and redefine themselves in different positionings, whether it is geopolitical, whether it is economics, or whether it is purely security. These are the three frameworks according to which the countries of the world are grouping themselves. And some fall short, like for example, India, after having become a part of Quad, after having become a part of BRICS, after becoming part of SEO, doesn't have so much keenness to participate in SAARC or to participate in ASEAN. It is looking more towards the South-South dialogue. It's looking more towards the Indo-Pacific dialogue. And when we come and look at the SEO, we see that India is concerned about the Central Asian economies and the geopolitical region of Central Asia, whether it is Kyrgyzstan, whether it is Kazakhstan, whether it is Uzbekistan. So you remain the Tan, whichever Tan it is, India is concerned about that. Okay, coming back to the BRICS Summit. On the 9th of September 2021, where India chaired the BRICS Summit, and the chairmanship of BRICS is according to the acronym, and it rotates according to the acronym. And after India, China will be hosting the next BRICS Summit. This was the 13th BRICS Summit. It was 13th BRICS Summit. Oh my God, I have written K instead of S. Please don't make that mistake in your paper. I think that I'll just clear this up. This was the 13th summit. It was a celebration of 1.5 decade. 1.5 decade of BRICS. So what was said about it? It was BRICS at the rate 15 intra-BRICS. Please write this. Intra-BRICS cooperation. Intra-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation, for continuity, consolidation, and consensus. And our Prime Minister, who used these words, said that these 4 C's are going to define BRICS for the next 15 years. So we have completed a decade if we start looking at it from 2006 when we thought of formulating it, and in 2009 when it came into being, and then in 2010 when South Africa joined it. If you look back, India is now the chairman in the 15th year of BRICS, but the summit is the 13th summit. All right. So in the 13th summit, having completed 1.5 decades, Prime Minister Shri Modi says that BRICS at the rate 15 for the next 15 years is going to be involved with what is called intra-BRICS cooperation for continuity, consolidation, and consensus. And he says that these four C's are what is going to define the future of BRICS. And along with that, he has talked about an agreed principle for all foreign ministers to join together to bring this into being. So, who were the other heads of state who were present at that time? From Brazil, there was Jair Bolsonaro. There was Jair Bolsonaro. From South Africa, there was Cyril Ramaphosa. From Russia, there was Putin. Vladimir Putin. And then there was China, Xi Jinping. So what is BRICS? BRICS is a voice of the emerging economies. It is a voice of the emerging economies of the world. So says the Prime Minister of India. They agreed in principle. So what was the result of this 13th summit which took place, for which India was the host, and what was released was called the New Delhi Declaration. It's called the New Delhi Declaration. This article is from the Times of India. I will try and share the link with you. You can read it up from there. And there is another write-up on what is called, if you go to the Google, you please type Silk Route. You get various options for BRICS. Take the Silk Route option. They've given us a good write-up about the BRICS summit, and they have quoted the various dignitaries that I mentioned to you right now. It just gives you a perspective on how each one looks at BRICS. And I think that is important. I will be, of course, quoting it from there, making it very short for you so that you don't have to read the original article. But if you still feel that you need to check it on, please do that. All right, so this is the voice of the emerging economies of the world. And what did all these leaders agree upon? They agreed in principle to what the foreign ministers had agreed earlier of strengthening and reforming multilateral systems. Okay, so what did in the New Delhi Declaration, besides the four C's which Shri Modi emphasized, they talked about strengthening, they talked about strengthening and reforming the multilateral systems. The multilateral systems, including the United Nations and WTO, the World Trade Organization. And you will come to know why. So that, and this is important, and please use this word, so that global governance, is more receptive and effective. So they have talked about strengthening and reforming the multilateral systems, including the UN and the WTO, so that they are more receptive and effective in global governance. This is one of the commitments of BRICS. A lot of good English, but we would need to understand that all the countries which are coming together have various different issues which they are facing. And we will come to that after a minute, after we've covered the summit. Once I'm done with the summit, I will go back into the politics of the organization and how is it being viewed in the international arena. And that should summarize and give you a perspective on what you have to write in your answer. Okay, so we've done this, and now we come to the other point. It has also talked about that the UNSC, or what is called the United Nations Security Council, the reforming principles for the UNSC need a new lease of life. a new lease of life. If this becomes a part of Delhi Declaration, it is surprising since China has already redrawn its map after September in January itself, where it has taken over areas of Arunachal Pradesh. But still, it has always and every time vetoed India's presence in the Security Council, and it talks about giving it a new lease of life. So that is the good point about it. So it says that the United Nations Security Council needs to be reformed and include new lease of life in discussions about reforming principles need new lease of life so far as the UNSC is concerned. Then the leaders expressed full commitment. So the first point was the four C's. Then the second point was about the global economies of the emerging economies of the world. And the third point was the multilateral systems. And the fourth point is the UN Security Council. Now we come to what is the fifth point. In the fifth point, they say that they want to implement the UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement in totality. So India, Russia, Brazil, and China, South Africa say they want to implement the UNFCCC along with the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, something which the Quad is also saying. Now, when you keep reading these organizations, some of the points will keep on coming back to you. So all of them will talk about transfer of technology. All of them will talk about trade relations and some free trade zone. And all of them will invariably talk about climate change and sustainable development. तो मान लीजिए आपने कोई क्वेश्चन पढ़ा और उसका आपको कोई जवाब नहीं आ रहा, पर आपको अपने रिलेशन में अगर आप ये 3 पॉइंट भी लिखेंगे तो आप कभी गलत नहीं होंगे, क्योंकि ये सारे के सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस एक ही तरह की बात करते हैं. तो when you are going to read about all these organizations, you're going to see that yes, this is it, except of course those which are being formed specifically for the purpose of military alignment or which are strategic military organizations. Those you can keep aside, but otherwise in general, all organizations will have a commitment to Kyoto Protocol, to Paris Agreement, and to UNFCCC. Then there was an agreement, this is the 6th point, there was an agreement on space agencies and remote sensing. तो इंडिया के लिए इसरो सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है. आप देखिए कि किसी भी इंटरनेशनल फोरम में इसरो की बात सबसे पहले की जाती है. कोई भी टाई अप है, whether it's disaster management, whether it is climate change, whether it is the agriculture platform, हर जगह इसरो को बढ़ावा दिया जा रहा है. तो यहाँ पर भी इसरो को जो है इसकी एनहांस करनी है कैपेबिलिटीज. They want to have a relationship or a partnership in research capabilities of remote sensing. So they want to enhance their capacities in this regard. Then there was what is called the agricultural cooperation. So there was an action plan on agriculture, agriculture 21 to 24, where agriculture research was going to be a topic of discussion. This is your 7th point. And therefore, an agriculture cooperative stand was launched, or it was adopted. An agriculture cooperation plan was adopted by the 13th BRICS Summit, which called for agriculture research platform. Then there is what is called the intra-BRICS trade. Now this is the 7th point. Now you come to the 8th point. There is what is called the intra-BRICS trade involving the customs department. It is going to involve the customs department. Then the 9th point was that it took on the new development bank, or also known as the BRICS Development Bank, had new members from Bangladesh, UAE, and Uruguay. These became new partners of the New Development Bank, also known as the BRICS Development Bank, which is stationed at Shanghai. Also, the BRICS headquarter is in Shanghai. So, whereas you are seeing AUKUS Quad की लड़ाई एक तरफ, अब आप देखेंगे BRICS versus SCO, मतलब Shanghai Corporation on the one hand. But Shanghai Corporation में एक बात है again, जो कि अभी AUKUS में भी हो गई, कि Shanghai is also a strategic military partnership within the Shanghai Five. There is a military partnership. Pakistan और इंडिया तो 2017 में उसको ज्वाइन करे हैं, but before that, the Shanghai Five are in a strategic military relationship. Reason being that the Shanghai Five came into existence only because it wanted to resolve the border disputes that it had with China. And because they were able to resolve those issues, that Shanghai Five came into being, and then later on, India and Pakistan now are part of that Shanghai Five, and then it has now become the Shanghai Corporation or the CSO. ओके सो अब यहाँ पे आप ब्रिक्स और एससीओ को देख रहे हैं क्योंकि चाइना इंडिया दोनों जगह कॉमन हो गया है. So they are saying that we are going to have a intra-BRICS trade and we are going to have a new development bank for the Bangladesh, which includes Bangladesh, UAE, and the Uruguay. So when Jim O'Neill in 2001 talked about the emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, it formalized in a meeting in 2006. South Africa joined in 2010. The BRICS brings together the largest developing countries of the world. So it brings together 5 largest developing countries of the world. अभी मैं आपको उसी पे छोड़ देती हूँ क्योंकि अगर मैं आपको ये नहीं बताऊंगी कि नवा के बाद 10वां पॉइंट कौन सा है तो आप लोग थोड़ा सा मिसप्लेस हो जाएंगे. So now we talk about green tourism. So the new development bank, which is also known as the BRICS Development Bank, got new partners from Bangladesh, UAE, and the Uruguay. The 10th point, the 13th summit talked about what is called the green tourism. And it said that we need to promote measures which can shape a more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive tourism sector. ये please आप अपने आप लिख लीजिए. To measures which can shape a more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive tourism sector. BRIC continues to play a significant role in the post-COVID global recovery. और इसके लिए Prime Minister Modi कहते हैं that the enhanced BRIC cooperation will be used to build back resiliently, innovatively, creditably, and sustainably. So BRIC continues to cooperate in the post-COVID scenario where all economies have taken a beating. And in this phase of enhanced BRIC cooperation, Shri Modi says that we need to build back resiliently. We need to build back in the post-COVID situation. So green tourism, then post-COVID situation, we need to build back resiliently, innovatively, creditably, or credibly, and sustainably. If you want to write good answers, be prepared with the SDG goals all the time. All those SDG goals after the Paris Summit and what has now come to be the COP26, you please be clear. The SDG goals are with you always because your answers will get better. They will have a background if you keep that in mind. So अगर आपने SDG goals पढ़ा हुआ है, मेरा इस पे लेक्चर है. अगर आपको लगता है कि आपको फिर से उसकी क्लास चाहिए तो आप बताइएगा. We will have another class on SDG goals because in no matter whichever sphere you are going, the sustainable development goals will keep on reappearing. And in all international relations, climate is a very important factor. So somebody is a polluter, Somebody is the pollutant. Somebody is paying for what has been lost due to the other's aggressive emission of greenhouse gases. And who will pay for what is to be decided by the world. And naturally, those who have more money will be in a commanding position. And that is how the international relations of the world are being shaped. And therefore, in this scenario, where we have the G7, we have also now a BRICS 5, which is trying to find out how, as emerging economies, it can do better to set up an alternative to what is the IMF and the WTO. This should be very clear that the BRICS is, as an organization, primarily into economic trade relations. It is there to ensure that the economies, the 5 emerging economies of the world, do not lose their credibility in the market as a result of the devaluation of their currencies. So please keep this in mind. I will again repeat it in some part of the lecture, but the coming together of the 5 countries is for economic reason, and the part that the IMF loan system was weighing heavy and that their credibility in the market was being lost led them to find another organization, which is the BRICS. So it has an economic backing, as if you look at it in terms of an association or as in terms of a conference, whichever way you want to view it. So the BRICS said that in the post-COVID situation, the BRIC countries will rebuild resiliently, innovatively, creditably, and sustainably. These are the words which have been used by our country's leader, and therefore they have a lot of meaning. Now, what has happened as a result of the 13th summit is that a virtual BRICS Research and Development Center, a virtual BRICS Research and Development Center has come into existence, which will see how to deal pandemics in the future. And when we are talking about this, please don't forget that we have the person in a present during the time when this is being launched, who has been responsible for this big pandemic. But you cannot write that anywhere. What you will only write is that the BRICS has together come to what is called a virtual BRICS research and vaccine. This is a virtual BRICS research. This will be vaccine research. Okay, I'll write it for you again. You cannot mistake this. So there has to be a virtual BRICS vaccine research and development center useful for handling future pandemics. And this is being taken care by the health ministers from the 5 countries. So this needs to be added to your answer. After that, the BRICS has also what at the Delhi Declaration. This I think was the 12th or the 13th point. I've forgotten, so I'll put it 12th. Then the 13th point is that what is called the BRICS counter intelligence initiative. Now, while China and India are also members of the SCO, the Brazil and South Africa are not part of it. And therefore, this additional element of having active groups for monitoring intelligence, another additional layer is being added in the counterintelligence initiative. So those terrorist organizations which are present in the African continent, like the Al-Qaeda or what is called the INSIA and what is called the ISIL in South Africa, and the Al Qaeda तो आप जानते ही हैं, and the Al Qaeda in the African continent are also going to be monitored by this counter intelligence initiative. Along with the so an additional layer of Africa has been added by the 13th BRICS Summit for covering areas of terrorist activities and those who are dealing with drug trafficking or for illegal immigration. These are all areas of concern for the BRICS countries. So this counterintelligence initiative, which again India and China are already a part of in the SCO, where it is called the RATS, and we will do when we are doing the SCO. So over there, you will know how India, along with China, and it's a surprise because they are intelligence initiatives to counter terrorism, where we know that some countries are being supported by the other for raining terrorism against India. But you please remember this, that India does not ever leave any forum where it does not flag the issue of terrorism. And it is very important because as a result of it, India is getting results. Okay, so Pakistan doesn't get a trade embargo enlisted against it because of the support of China. But the fact is that no matter how much Pakistan says that Kashmir is a part of Pakistan, nobody is ready to pay heed to it. Why? Because on every international forum, India is very clear that Pakistan is indulging in terrorism. And Pakistan has also had cuts in its support program from the USA as a result of indulgence in terrorism, because this terrorism has reached the doors of the Western nations. So when we look at Quad and when we look at AUKUS, we are talking of an Anglosphere. We are talking of an Anglosphere, whereas BRICS becomes more of a South-South dialogue. So in this South-South dialogue, Sri Modi says that there we need to build credibility and responsibility for all the nations. It should not be forgotten, however, that Sri Modi said that this COVID pandemic has been the result of the irresponsible behavior of some countries, and WHO needs to find out who are responsible for the spread of this pandemic to fix responsibility. In his opening speech, Sri Modi made this statement, which of course Li Jinping then said that we need to have a bigger, brighter vision for solidarity, for equity, for social justice. And coming from people who have entered the Galwan Valley, who have entered East Ladakh, it sounds big, but we need to be having both sides of the perspective. So what India is trying to do is that while it on its own, it might not be able to counter Pakistan and China, it is ensuring that on every international forum, its voice is heard. And that is the basis of international relations. So long as you are able to tell your part and convince the countries and other partners in an organization that your story is the right one, you are successful, or you're a successful strategist in international relations. So these points you must keep in mind and keep putting in your answers, that India did not miss the opportunity of bringing up the aspect of counter-terrorism initiatives, especially in view of the Afghan crisis. So when in the 9th of September, the BRICS summit was taking place, Russia expressed its concern about the Afghan crisis, and the counter-terrorism initiative and the counter-intelligence initiative. These were two highlights. According to the international strategists, this vaccine research center and this counter-intelligence initiative and counter-terrorism initiative were the highlights of the BRICS summit for the 13th BRICS summit. That is what was one of the articles which I was reading, where it was highlighted. So I want to just emphasize this here, that the counter-terrorism initiative was part of what is going to be the result of the Afghan crisis, and the US withdrawal from Afghan will result in more terrorist activities and drug trafficking from this country, which needs to be controlled. And this was put forward both by India and Russia on the forum. And the act of terrorism and killing at the Kabul airport was condemned by the BRICS nation. It means that as a cooperative organization, both China and Russia, along, of course, with India, which has always expressed concern about terrorism from Pakistan and Afghanistan, a unanimous voice condemning the terrorist activities in and from Afghanistan were raised on this forum. So India's point was well taken, and now there is going to be a cooperation of counterintelligence initiative and counter-terrorism initiative, which is going to go into the details of this. This organization will also take care of border disputes, of immigration issues, and of course, drug trafficking, like I told you earlier. Another very important point which was raised here was by Brazil and India together. If you remember that India and Brazil had gone to the WTO to ask for a waiver of TRIPS. Now, TRIPS is what is called the trade related aspects of the intellectual property rights. अगर आप इसको सीधा सीधा समझिए कि कोई देश अगर किसी भी तरह की दवा बनाता है या वैक्सीन बनाता है या कोई साइंटिफिक काम भी करता है या साइंटिफिक टेक्नोलॉजी बनाता है तो उसको वो पेटेंट कर देता है. पेटेंट करने के बाद एक तो पहला, दूसरा कोई आदमी उसको बना नहीं सकता जब तक उसको रॉयल्टी ना पे करे. और फर्स्ट इज दिस. सेकंड, they can buy it, but when they buy it, they have to pay for the research and development which has gone into making that vaccine or that medicine or that technology, and along with that, the royalty of the corporate group which has launched it and brought it to the market also has to be paid. तो ये पेमेंट इंडिया ने और ब्राजील ने कहा, सॉरी, इंडिया एंड साउथ अफ्रीका, both of them went to the WTO to say कि आप इस ट्रिप्स को हमारे लिए for vaccine massive production and to reach all corners of the world, TRIPS should be waived by the WTO. तो इसके लिए both the organizations, the Delhi Declaration was emphatic that for more rapid expansion of the COVID-19 vaccine, the Western nations need to permit the developing countries to forego TRIPS in vaccine production and distribution. So vaccine production is being looked after by Russia, by China, and by India in massive numbers. And so Brazil and South Africa are the recipients of both these vaccines. But India and South Africa went to the WTO to ask them to waiver TRIPS. And so the 13th summit of BRICS highlighted that on the WTO forum should forego TRIPS or the trade-related intellectual property rights in terms of vaccine production and supply. Now, what did the Chinese counterpart or Xi Jinping say on this summit after Shri Modi had made this categorical statement that the WHO should find out which country is responsible for the pandemic and they should pay for it? He comes up with, we have made, and this is Xi Jinping, and I'm quoting him, you need not write this point, but you should know the China's perspective, that is all. We have made solid progress in various areas of cooperation in the spirit of pragmatism, innovation, and win-win cooperation. We have supported multilateral and taken part in global governance in spirit of equity, justice, and mutual assistance. So this is the kind of statement that Xi Jinping has made after Modi's statement. And they call about refraining from violence and setting up suitable peaceful means. They stress the need to foster an inclusive intra-Afghan dialogue to ensure stability, peace, law, and order. So Afghanistan was on the radar at the BRICS summit, and it condemned in the strongest terms the terrorist attack at the Kabul airport. Now, the new development bank, or the BRICS Development Bank, came into existence in and around 15th of July 2014. The agreement was came to be signed in 2015, where it said, now we will go back to the history of the, so these were the highlights of the 13th BRICS Summit. By the time you will be writing your answer, there will be an additional BRICS Summit, and then you will be making a comparison of what has come through. But we need to give you a background from where BRICS has emanated and why it needs to be kept as an important point of discussion. So in through 2001, James O'Neill wrote about the four emerging economies of the world, where it mentioned India, Brazil, China, and Russia. At that point of time, South Africa was not within its preview. Jim O'Neill wrote this paper called the Building Better Global Economic BRICS. He wrote Building Better Global Economic BRICS, and it was actually Rupa Purushottam, who was a research assistant in writing that paper, who used the acronym BRICS. Acronym is your short form. So use the acronym BRICS. So Jim O'Neill said this in 2001. However, in 2006, in the general debate of the General Assembly of United Nations in New York, the foreign ministers of these four countries came together, and on the 16th of June 2009, at the Yekaterinburg summit in Russia, I will write the word for you. On 16th June 2009, at the Yekaterinburg in Russia. Okay, so I spell it out for you. Y-A-K-Y-E. It's Y-E. Y-E-K-A-T. E-R-I-N-B-U-R-G. So at the Yekaterinburg, Russia, it decided to cooperate to build better global economy. So at the Yekaterinburg summit on the 16th of June 2009, these four countries decided to come together to build better global economies. Better global economies. And to reform financial institutions. And to reform financial institutions. That was the motive for the BRICS. It wanted to come together to make a difference in the global economy, or to have a better global economy, and to reform the financial institutions. Getting a loan from the IMF, getting them from the world, getting a loan from the World Bank was becoming increasingly difficult for these developing economies, and therefore it thought that it should come together to provide linkages to each other and financial support, and therefore we had BRICS, in which Brazil from South America, Russia from Europe, India from Asia, and China too from Asia came together. If you look at it in terms of the area of influence of these countries, they are the five largest developing countries of the world. They represent 41% of the global population. They represent 41% of the global population. They represent close to 24% of the GDP of the world. So they have a global GDP of 24%, and they control 16% of the world trade. And they control 16% of the world trade. Alright? So 41% of the global population, 24% of the GDP of the world, and 16% of the world trade is being controlled by these five developing economies. I told you that it was Goldman Sachs Asset Management when he said Jim O'Neill. That fact I've already told you. Now what happened? Over a period of time, these countries realized that there was an overpowering influence of the US dollar in the world economy. And all these parts need not be written. I'm just giving you a small history of how the World Development, the BRICS Development Bank came into existence. At that point of time, it was thought that these five countries together might have a new currency, and Russia was very vociferous about it. Then came the part of having some kind of backing up for their financial institutions. So in the year, this discussion came out in 2013, where these economies together decided to provide a $75 billion package to the IMF, provided that, I repeat, provided that the IMF took about some institutional changes, to which the IMF refused. So in 2013, the BRICS country wanted to give a $75 billion support package to the IMF, provided that it brought about some radical changes in its setup, to which the IMF refused. Having happened again on 15th July in 2014 in what is called the Fortaleza in Brazil, these five countries came together to form what is called the BRICS Development Bank, and signed a treaty for what is called as the contingent reserve. It's called the CRA, which means the contingent reserve arrangement. It is called the contingent reserve arrangement. It's called the contingent reserve arrangement. All right. So what is a contingent reserve arrangement? Is a framework for providing protection against global liquidity measures. Contingent reserve arrangement is a framework for providing protection against global liquidity measures. These emerging economies suffered volatile markets as a result of rapid economic liberalization. So as a competitor to the IMF and to increase South-South cooperation, I repeat, as a competitor to IMF and to increase the South-South cooperation, on the 4th of September in Ankara, Turkey, the CRA was formalized. But the concept of CRA came at Fort Zella on 15 July in 2017. And from there, the concept of a BRICS Development Bank also emerged. The thing came into effect in 2015. The BRICS Development Bank, or the new development bank, came up in Shanghai with a corpus of $50 billion, with a $10 billion from each of the five countries. Having said that, the bank has a capacity to lend out or to do business to the tune of $34 billion in a year. The entire money can be only used for infrastructure projects. Further, as on date, the new development bank is engaged in 53 projects involving $15 billion. So the new development bank is an answer to the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, for the developing economies. In 2006, Morgan Stanley came up with the concept of the fragile economies. This is important. I'm giving you a background as to how BRICS has come into existence. And so you should know from where you are answering. Any question on BRICS, you will now be able to answer because you have a perspective. ये economic reason से बनाया गया, ये तब बनाया गया जो developing economies थी, उनको liberalization की तरफ जाना ही पड़ा as a result of the reforms, economic reforms, which were initiated. जो आपकी ये ट्रिप्स है इन सब की वजह से, और जो पेटेंट की लॉबी पूरी आ गई from the US. This is way back. I'm talking the late 80s and early 90s when India also went into for liberalization. तो ऐसा कहते हैं कि 2006 में मॉर्गन स्टैनली ने कुछ फ्रेजाइल इकोनॉमीज की बात करी. अब उन फ्रेजाइल इकोनॉमीज में कौन कौन इंक्लूडेड था? The fragile economies that Morgan Stanley Group talked of. Morgan Stanley is a group which does survey. So Morgan Stanley Group talked about fragile economies in which it mentioned India, it mentioned Brazil, it mentioned Indonesia, it mentioned Turkey, and it mentioned South Africa. However, later on, Morgan Stanley in the following year said that as a result of the liberalization process and the change in economies that the countries have done, India has made a turnaround by 80% of liberalizing its economy. Indonesia close by with a close 65%, whereas Turkey has done 10%, Brazil has done some 20%, and South Africa has done even less than 10%. So India and Indonesia came out of that fragile economy setup, which was postulated by Morgan Stanley in 2006, whereas the others, the Brazil, Turkey, and South Africa, are still one of the world's fragile economies as of now. Brazil has, of course, now grown up, but Turkey and South Africa are still in the same range. So, because of the lack of the economic changes which were required at the time, opening up the economy which was required, and the reform process, India's economy bounced back post 2006. But the other, India and Indonesia bounced back, but the others suffered. Because of the liquidity in the market, which came about as a result of the liberalization process, these economies were finding it difficult to maintain the credibility of their currency. In this scenario, the contingent reserve assurance scheme, which came up by BRICS, and the new development bank, which has come up, is an answer to counteract whatever terms and conditions that IMF places on the developing economies, or what the North puts on the South. So it became a kind of a confrontation between the South and the North in terms of economic issues. So the contingent reserve arrangement provides a backing to the developing economies ever since after 2014. And now we know that the UAE, Bangladesh, and Uruguay have become part of it. In fact, Bangladesh wanted, the BRIC countries wanted it to be a 1% partner. Bangladesh wants to be a 1% partner in the BRICS Bank or the New Development Bank, but its amount has been reduced to 0.76%. Its contribution at present is of 0.76%. The other countries together have contributed 10 billion each. So right now it is a 50 billion organization, but in times to come, the countries commit, the BRICS commit that it is going to take it up to $100 billion with a 41% contribution from China, which is now being opposed by the other countries in the BRICS summit. If you look at BRICS, each of the countries has their own issues. So Brazil is a transiting, a budding democracy, but it faces all those problems of a developing economy. India and China are at loggerheads most of the time. Russia is an oligarchic system. So while Brazil is a democracy, Russia is an oligarchy. We need not mention what is China. With such divergent economies and such divergent political views, how will BRICS go ahead in the future? Now, these are the questions which are going to be asked to you, and this is how you're going to answer them. So the international trade analysts say that the BRICS does not bring anything new to the table. It continues with its neoliberal policy. A person from the International Relations Organization in India by the name of Mr. Prasad says that BRICS cannot be the locomotive for political and economic changes in the South, which means the developing economies. Reason being, there are such divergent and different views of each of the countries on so many issues, whether it is border dispute, whether it is sharing of power, whether it is economic contribution. So these countries have to rise above all this in order to make an important economic difference in times to come. In the meantime, all these five countries have agreed that other than the SWIFT system of money transfer, they should envisage or build up their own kind of money transfer technology. So China has come up with what is called the CIPS, or what is known as the, so SWIFT का full form क्या है? Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. I repeat, SWIFT is Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, and it's a Belgian organization that sees that end-to-end money transfer across the world takes place while keeping the security and the backup protected for the money transfer. And now China comes up with what is called the CIPS, the CIPS. It comes up with what is called the CIPS. It's called the CIPS for money transfer. But as of now, this has not been recognized by the countries of the world. This is being used by China on its own. So why do we need a specialized agency for money transfer? For reasons of security. Like the head-on, if you look at the head-on between the US and China, it has come because America has vetoed China's taking over of its industry in terms of telecommunication and conductors, and that post is now being taken over by England. So England is trying to buy and support the semiconductor conductor trade in the USA. And if India gets its way, it will also become one of the telecommunication partners in the USA. But China's entry has been banned by the US, and this is one of the major reasons of bickering between the two. And here in BRICS, the countries are deciding that they should have a system which is separate from SWIFT so that they can have their own money transactions. So in all, BRICS wants to bring about a change in the economic world and to reduce the dominance of the IMF. Now, what is stopping it from doing this is that as economies, we are struggling to our own battles. We have so much of prejudice and communal fighting. We have border problems along our boundaries, and therefore the BRICS business is suffering. However, we have done good partnerships in the area of science and technology, in the area of drug trafficking, in the area of money laundering, and what is called in international relations as, the word is called rapprochement. Okay, and you have to use this concept, rapprochement. It's spelled like rapprochement, so आप spelling से मतलब रखिए. Rapprochement, or what we call the rapprochement. We pronounce it like rapprochement, and this rapprochement is a very important concept in international relations. It talks about bringing together or an amicable coming together of nations. So BRICS is working on what is called a rapprochement between the South-South and the South and North. It is trying to bring these countries together to fight the world. Having told you about BRICS now, we are at 1 o'clock. We started at 11. We took a 2 minutes break. I'm going to come and read your remarks. Do you want to do the SCO right now, or shall I take it tomorrow for you? I want to read it here. Okay, so I'm happy that you all are as tired as I am. So we'll take the SCO tomorrow. It's been a very intense class for me, and it required a lot of effort to bring in you all the sources. Towards the end, I had to be a little repetitive because I was losing my thought. I wanted to cover all the papers that I had read. Reason being, I don't want you to miss any point when you write an answer. You can have a perspective, but whatever anybody says in writing, and it comes like as a paper by an international organization or an international forum, then the kids should know about it. And that was the reason I was trying to juggle in a lot of information. I hope you have enjoyed the class. If there's something which you've not understood, please put in your remarks today. Tomorrow, at some time, whenever I get time, I'll take up SEO for you, or we will do it on Monday. We will look at the schedule of the other teachers also. And thank you so much for your time. From here, now we are going to take up the second, because we are taking international relations. I'm going to take up the entire topic of women, which is also a part of the second paper. And after women, we are going to do what is called pollution and waste management, two topics which I really don't like, but I have to teach you because they are very important and they do come as big, long questions in your mains paper. And maybe some part of it might make an appearance in your prelims too. So those are the two topics you have to look forward. And the next topic on the anvil is women. And because I need to tell you this as a part of trigger warning, some portions of the class on women is going to be a little brazen, and you might feel a little uncomfortable about it, but I'm going to try and make it as easy for you as possible. But the topic itself requires that you know these case histories, that you know these provisions of the constitution, and so therefore we will go into that. So SEO remains. Otherwise, now what we have done is that we started with quads, got you to AUKUS, brought in bricks with it, and we are ending with SEO. Out of this, AUKUS and SEO have made an appearance in this year's paper, but it stops them nothing from putting it in your prelims paper, and it stops them nothing from putting it in the mains paper next year. So thank you so much for your time.